Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here, and today we're taking a look at the balance changes for Wehrmacht, Brits and DAK that arrived in the 1.90 patch. Moving on to the Wehrmacht changes, and we're starting out with Panzergrenadiers. Their Vet 1 ability automatic fire has been nerfed. The speed debuff it gives has been massively increased. I think it used to start at 10% speed debuff and escalate up to a cap of 50%. Now it starts at 60% and escalates up to 85%, so see how this goes here.
Fire everything we have once in range.
Oh, that's so slow. Oh my goodness, that's slow.
Get moving. Eyes front.
Something's going on with the animations as well. Similar with cautious movement. Is that what they're called? On scouts. Doesn't seem to be animating properly. Interesting. That is like a huge speed penalty. I think they might have overdone a little bit on this one. I do think Panzergrenadiers were, in general, overperforming in the previous patch. Maybe this was a bit too spammable as well, but yeah, that's crazy. The 251 Halftrack has had its machine gun buffed similar to the M3, but not quite as extreme. So here's the old value 1.82 patch, 14 up close, out to 4.7 far. Now we're going to 18 up close, almost 10 far. So about double at far, but about 4 more up close. Go back and forth a couple times, you can see it's the same axis on the graph this time around, so you can see the jump up. Fortunately, I couldn't get this on the same graph this time around. So yeah, I like this change because, you know, the Vet 1 vanilla unupgraded half-track can plant Regal Mines. And I always tried to do Regal Mine strategies, but it's just too hard to get that working. But now with the extra long-range damage, I think this is going to make this way more usable and kind of compensating for the fact that the on-field reinforcing of these vehicles that got nerfed a bit. They're kind of getting caught in the crossfire, you know, it's more hitting like the mid-trucks, upgraded sections of them, rather than the vanilla half-tracks. So yeah, now the vanilla half-tracks doing more damage at all ranges and maybe a little bit better against light vehicles like the ultralights as well. The 221 got a small machine gun buff at mid and long range. So it used to do 14.6 at a far, now it's doing 16.8, so not that big of a buff, but I want to mention the curve on this now. Like really flat, you don't lose that much damage going from point blank to a far. So, you know, unless you need to nullify cover, you can kind of sit back with it and pick from a distance. You don't have to get up close and into anti-tank grenade range. So it makes it easier to use thanks to this change. I will say that the 221 with the machine gun upgrade specifically has never really felt very relevant in the game. Just like timing wise, it comes in quite late, similar timing to the Humber, but obviously it cannot fight the Humber head to head. Upgrade with the Panzerbuchse is pretty relevant in anti-tank. You know, does a lot of anti-tank damage and quite fast, good at chasing down for kills. Obviously, you know, it's quite limited in the angles that it can fire. But yeah, that's felt relevant, but the machine gun upgrade on it is not. The radio antenna upgrade on the 221 also got buffed from 90 out to 125 range, similar to the DAK recon tractor that got buffed a patch or two ago in the exact same fashion. So yeah, now you can see all this way. Look how far out you can see. That's really far. They still haven't synced up the pulses and the reveal timings to work together. Like since they expanded the range, pulsing and revealing times aren't like aligned. I think they're synced up for it still to work properly at 90 range, so rather than expanding all the way out to 125. So it would be nice if they could adjust that animation a bit. On the Wehrmacht Marder, the sight main gun ability has been buffed. Now when you activate it, it's only 5 seconds before you can deactivate it again instead of 7. So yeah, if you accidentally set up too close to the enemy, you'll be able to get out of harm's way 2 seconds earlier, which can make all the difference, life and death, if you're accidentally caught in front of an AT gun. I don't think the Marder is like that bad of a unit, it's just we don't see it that much because Panzergrenadier Company was so much better in the previous patch. Fallschrimjager have received a couple changes this patch. First off, their population cost has gone down from 10 to 9, making them a little bit more affordable. And then their DPS has also been increased. They've really been struggling since the TTK changes, basically an irrelevant unit. So yeah, they got a DPS buff here. On the old version, they did 28 near out to 12.4 far, and now they do 32 near out to 14 far. So I think it works out to roughly 14% more DPS close and about 18% more at far. So not the 25% that we saw from quite a few other units, but Still a pretty respectable amount. And I think, you know, with mainlines looking more expensive compared to the more elite squads, I'm not saying Fallschrimjager are going to be like absolute crushers or anything like that, but they're definitely worth trying again. The Vet 1 ability on the LG40 high explosive shells have had their penetration nerfed. They used to have the exact same amount of penetration as the armor piercing shells, but now it is a flat 30 penetration at all ranges. So they'll still be okay against light vehicles, but anything larger than about the Greyhound, it will start to struggle. So yeah, another nerf to it here. Remember, it did also get a setup time nerf similar to most other anti-tank guns, so it's going to be a little bit slower setting up as well. Still faster than most other anti-tank guns, but yeah, slower than it was before. And yeah, I think, you know, all the nerfs that this has received over the past few patches, I think this unit's kind of going to fall back into obscurity. The Wespe has got a new Vet 1 ability called Tracking Barrage, replacing its Creeping Barrage. For 35 munitions, fires 3 shells, and will track the unit's position as long as you have sight of it. So we're going to see how this goes here. I'm going to target this rifleman, pause, then tell the rifleman to move. We're going to get them to move sideways first off. Let's see how it goes. So this is about 60 range away. So it tracks them pretty well. Every shell was doing damage, even though they were continuously moving like that. And I would say that was maybe one of like the worst case scenarios, like moving across the angle of Wespe rather than directly forwards or backwards. That was actually pretty impressive against like a fully, constantly on the move squad. And is it has a different cooldown to the regular barrage as well?
Main gun ready, barrage.
What? Wow. Wow. Okay, well, that makes it even better then. It does have a long cooldown, 90 seconds, but that was very impressive. Now I'm going to try it with a squad of riflemen charging at the Wespe. Let's see how it goes. I mean, that's like pretty steady damage for a squad that's constantly moving. Like every shell does damage, and the squad's at half health at the end of that. That I'm actually very, very impressed with how strong that is. That's way better than the Creeping Barrage. I will say that up until this point, the Vespe's maybe been like the worst of all the howitzers, worse than the Bishop, and a lot of the other howitzers got buffed in the last few patches. This thing has kind of been lagging behind. So yeah, that's a big buff to it. Do note that the Tracking Barrage has a minimum range of 35. So if a tank's shooting at you, you're probably not going to be able to shoot back at it with the Tracking Barrage. Otherwise, that could lead to some pretty clowny moments. And also has a maximum range of 120-ish, I would guess, compared to the regular barrages, maybe 180. So yeah, shorter on the tracking than on the regular howitzer. But I will say that you could, if you have sight of your opponent's bishop or something, you've got a recon plane up, like maybe you could try use this to target counter barrage their bishop. And if you get lucky scatter, both shots land on it clean, you could kill their opponent's like kind of fragile artillery units. So that's another interesting use case for it. The Italian coastal battle group has received a couple changes. First off, Designate defensive line has come down in command point cost from 2 to 1. This ability has never really recovered in terms of popularity since it got the healing removed, even with all the buffs and stuff they've done since that stage. But I think at 1 command point, maybe we'll see some selections, maybe not too much use, but selections just so you can progress into the tree faster. Because say in 1v1s, I could definitely imagine a scenario where you want rapid fortifications early so you can put up a really cheap mid-bunker in your base for healing. So I can imagine this getting selected for that purpose. But for it actually seeing use, still not super convinced. It is only 50 munitions these days. Covers an okay area, but kind of requires setup. Can't use it offensively, which does limit it a little bit. Call the Reserves has also come down in command point cost from 2 to 1. But has gone up in munitions cost from 90 to 100. I'm guessing the developers want to make this more popular, but are expecting that post-reinforced cost increases, that this ability is going to become stronger, so that's why they nerfed its cost. And it does have to compete with Bulwark. So, you know, it's very stiff competition. It's just such a good ability. It's free, doesn't require any brain power. So something like this that requires setup is, or, you know, generally going to be the less popular option. But nice to see them trying to make it a more viable option. And I could imagine a situation where maybe you come down here with this kind of progression, so you can get like a bunker up pretty fast and pretty easily, so you can actually make use of these abilities a little bit more, you know, further close to the front lines. And the artillery officer's observer overwatch ability, the delay before the shells start to fall, has been reduced from 4 to 2 seconds. So yeah, it got nerfed from 0 to 4. Now it's going back to a middle ground of 2. Let's see how that feels. My machine gun here, I'm going to see if I can dodge like semi-effectively after I notice the circle on the ground with my machine gun.
Incoming! Infantry's on the move! Traversing fire! Get it go! Grab those bells, Private! Hey, come on!
So yeah, that feels fair. Onto the British forces now. We're starting out with the Bishop. Its Vet 1 ability, Direct Fire, has been reduced in cooldown from 30 seconds down to 5. Developers say they want to encourage you to use it in risky situations. So yeah, it is pretty fragile, 240 health, dies to 2 shots from most vehicles. But yeah, 5 seconds. Let's have a feel.
Come on, like you mean it! Mission receiving fire here!
So it seems to maybe be a little bit longer than that even, because
Press orders!
you use it and it's still active and then it starts.
Get to
I wonder if you can,
Orders!
yeah, it looks like you can kind of make it a bit faster if you
Get on Alpha!
start like a move order as soon as the shell's been launched. Otherwise, if you sit there, it seems to take about 2 or 3 seconds longer. So maybe that will be a bit of a tightrope top tip.
All right, which one of you kids wants it? One out! Stop!
Issue a move order straight away afterwards to kind of cancel the wind down animation. Seems to start this, so it'll actually cool down after 5 seconds rather than maybe like 7-ish, which, you know, does matter if you're directly trying to shoot at something multiple shots in a row. It does have a munitions cost of 25, remember, but I noticed in its Vet 3 bonus it becomes free. So if you get a Vet 3 Bishop, you can now use it as, you know, as a tank, basically, just blasting out these pretty, you know, pretty good shots. Do be aware that these shells seem to come out like really low to the ground, super, super low. So they have trouble with like colliding into the ground before they reach their target, which is why you often see me like drive right up to a squad if they don't have snares before using it. Just to, you know, more both reduce the scatter and reduce the chance of it like colliding into the ground somewhere, coming up short of the target. Now, what I was wondering is, would I be able to flank a Marder and kill it before it can kill my Bishop? So the Bishop will die in 2 shots to the Marder, but can I get 3 shots off on the Marder before it can turn 90 degrees and kill me in return? So what do you think about that? Let's give it a go, eh? Alright, here we go. It's not looking good, boys. Even with my cancelling technique, not quite enough. You can get 2 shots off if it's weak, but yeah, not 3. You're not going to be able to 1v1 it with a flank. I'm going to try that again because I noticed the Vet 2 recharge bonus does apply to the direct fire as well, not just to the high explosive barrage. So let's see how this goes.
Eager to get moving. Command's coming through. All right, which one of you kids? Oh, snap! Ah! Enemy armor here! Lieutenant, attack me! Artillery carrier lost.
Pretty close. I think if it was like a straight up flank fully on the behind, you'd be able to get it done once the Bishop is Vet 2. The Stuart has his manpower cost reduced by 20. Not a very big buff to it, and it was a very unpopular unit in the previous patch. But, you know, in this patch now, with infantry looking less appealing, maybe the enemy's going to be making more light vehicles, and maybe that makes the Stuart more relevant again. One thing I wanted to mention, you know, speaking of units from this tech tree, the CMP Polston, also a hideously unpopular unit, maybe occasionally used for AA, and that's about it. I've been playing with this a bit recently, and one issue I found with it was, its range when it's moving around before it gets the setup bonus is so short, you barely outrange snares. So it just makes it really hard to micro this. So honestly, I think if this got like literally 2.5 more range on regular mode before setup mode, and just subtract that from the bonus range, that would make this just easier to use and a more viable unit, because it's not that bad in performance. It's quite squishy, but it's also quite good at chasing down units on retreat. It's got decent wipe potential on retreat. So yeah, that would be my suggestion for the CMP Polston. The Crusader in its stock form with the 2-pounder has had its penetration nerfed at all ranges, but especially at mid-range, going down by 20 there. As somebody who played a bit of 2-pounder spam in the previous patch, I think this is probably fair enough. It did feel very effective. Very good against infantry, especially once you got 2 of them. It's quite easy to wipe squads on retreat. And then, yeah, they're quite effective against vehicles as well, because they're so fast they can just like zip around, flank. Stuff like Panzer IVs just weren't really able to counter Crusaders as effectively as they should be. So yeah, I think this is a fair enough change. And also, once it gets the 6-pound up gun, now it has better moving performance. Moving accuracy penalty has been reduced from 25% to 15%. So better at firing on the move. So it kind of forks the role of the Crusader even further. This one more of an anti-infantry specialist, and this one more of an anti-vehicle specialist. In the Australian Defence Battle Group, the CMP supply run truck has been buffed. The amount of resources it gives you, both on the minimum and the maximum end, have been increased. So it used to give you a minimum of 50 muni or 25 fuel, gives you half the amount of fuel as munitions for the same distance travelled. Now it's minimum of 65 munitions and 32 fuel, and the top end has also been increased as well. Up until this point, the CMP supply run truck hasn't been very popular because I don't think it compares very well to building a cache. Well, it hasn't up until now, because it gives the amount of resources that you would get from building a cache, like at least on a fuel point, for about 4 or 5 minutes. And then the cache can work for the rest of the game, whereas the supply run truck is one and done, and then maybe the enemy can come in and hijack it, steal the resources. So the risk versus reward wasn't really there, but I think now, it doesn't sound like much, but a little tickle of extra fuel on like a minimum supply truck run can make all the difference if you're trying to do a strategy where you're like rushing out a Crusader. The extra, 10-ish fuel can make a huge difference in terms of timings. Australian Lights have received a couple buffs this patch. First off, to their stock standard Lee Enfield rifle. Got an accuracy increase right across the range. So now it's doing about 10% more DPS than it used to. So yeah, I do think Australian Lights had fallen out of popularity post TTK changes, and this will certainly be enough to bring them back, I would guess. Make them, especially like a really early game bruising kind of squad, quite hard to contend with in the early stages of the game. Their scoped Lee Enfield rifle also got buffed, but only in the long range. Red's the old value, blue's the new value, about 10% more DPS at max range, which is not very good. I will say that to me, it felt like the weapon upgrade has been what is holding back the Australian Lights. They felt like okay at the start of the game, but their late game scaling felt very, very dependent on them being able to spam the sharpshooter ability. Just the raw performance of the scoped Lee Enfield rifle never really felt that potent. And now if we look at their stock standard Lee Enfield rifle compared to their scoped one, you see the stock standard is actually quite a lot more damaging up close. So it's a better option up close, whereas the scoped rifle is better long range. Whereas when I made my guide, which was back in patch 1.61 for Australian Lights, this is what the comparison used to look like. The scope rifle was better at all ranges, but especially long range. So they've kind of just now made the scope rifle not as good in close quarters anymore. Kind of makes it less of a reason that you'd want to go for scope rifle for some reasons. The trick used to be that the scope rifle was kind of bad in moving performance compared to the Lee Enfield. So that was a trade-off you got. But yeah, it's still going to be bad at moving, but then it's also bad up close. So, yes, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here, but I think the scope rifle is still going to be holding them back a bit. I will say as well, like the Vet 3 ability gives Australian Lights a 5% chance to kill a model that's below half health, I think it is. But, post TTK changes, now that engagements are happening faster, kind of gives the Australian Lights less opportunity to shoot bullets at a low health model and get that crit working. So felt like the faster TTK changes also kind of nerfed that Vet 3 auto crit on low health models. So that is maybe the area of Australian Lights that I would take a look at. Elsewhere in the Australian Defence Battle Group, the 17-pounder emplacement now costs 60 less manpower to construct. So, easier to afford, and then matters less if you lose it. So that's a pretty big buff there. On top of that, Hold the Line also got buffed in terms of duration, going from 30 up to 45 seconds. 50% longer on Hold the Line. I think this ability was already pretty decent, and the only reason we didn't see it more is that it competes with vehicle over repair, which is just so strong. But now with 45-second duration, if you're doing this, the 40% damage reduction on your 17-pounder replacement for 45 seconds, that is such a long time for the enemy to be continuously attacking you. The health doesn't really matter too much for emplacements, doesn't heal buildings that much, but it's pretty good on team weapons. So yeah, I expect to see a huge amount more Hold the Line post-patch. The Charge Creeping Barrage also came down in cost by 20 munitions. I think this ability has been kind of okay, but what's been holding it back is the targeting of it. Similar to airstrikes, you target in the middle of the strike, and then you set the angle. But, dissimilar to airstrikes, this thing's 2 or 3 times as long, and, the strike happens over, maybe 15 seconds or whatever, whereas airstrikes, all the shells land in a second. So it's different in the way they deliver their payloads, which kind of makes it not as good for the Charge Creeping Barrage because, quite often you're not going to have vision. So you're going to have to target on the edge of your vision, and then you're trying to guess where they are in the fog. And maybe you want to do one in reverse or something, and it's just kind of ugly. If instead you could set it down here, and this was the end of the barrage, where my sappers are right now, and then you could drag it off into the fog and charge into the fog like that, that would make this much stronger. I don't know if that's possible in the UI, and maybe it would make it too strong, I'm not sure, but I think that's holding it back because, oftentimes when you're playing Australian Defence, building Australian Lights, and if you go for the recce package, they don't have flares like you do with normal Tommies. So actually getting vision deep into your enemy's line to set this down somewhere relevant can be a bit of a struggle. British Commandos had the accuracy buffed, so now they're doing about 10% more DPS up close. They also had the accuracy buffed to other ranges, but they're doing so little damage beyond here that it doesn't really matter too much. I will say that I thought they were already pretty good pre this change. Maybe they weren't having a chance to stretch their legs too much because Wehrmacht Panzergrenadiers were so dominant in the previous patch with their strong Vet 1, but now that's been nerfed. So I would expect to see Commandos being far more successful, perhaps even on this stage of overpowered in this patch. I do think it's strange that Thompson upgraded Gurkhas didn't get the same treatment. Previous to this patch, Sten Commandos and Thompson Gurkhas were neck and neck in terms of performance, but now you can see the Commandos have the lead by pretty much the same margin that they got buffed in this patch. So yeah, Gurkha's kind of getting left in the dust, which is sad because you have to pay for this weapon upgrade, right? These squads cost basically the same population cost, same reinforced cost, though, Gurkhas will eventually get that discount probably from the battle group, so maybe you could argue they're not the same cost. And in terms of overall package of abilities, I think Commandos are better. They got the stealth, ambush bonus, out of combat healing, and all that. I think it's a more compelling package than what Gurkhas have to offer, so it's very strange that they're getting a DPS buff and Gurkhas do not. After you unlock the Commando at 2 command points, now you can unlock either the pack howitzer or what replaces the LMG Commando, the Commando support section, for 0 command points. So either of these you can unlock straight away afterwards, which makes it a bit more comparable to the US Forces pack howitzer and Special Operations, which arrives at 1 command point. It used to be 3 command points for this, so it arrived way later for Brits for some reason. And yeah, we'll see what the new Commando support sections are all about. arriving one command point earlier, like this unit was already kind of comparable to a Stormtrooper in terms of its firepower. So let's see what it can do now. They haven't really changed its performance at all. So, you know, arriving 2 command points, a squad with this much long-range firepower is going to be pretty good. They've made the LMG Commando into more of an officer unit. So now you can only have one of them on the field at any one time. And they've given it an ability here so that other Commando units can paradrop reinforcements when they're close to this Commando support section. So that's kind of nifty. They've also given it a new Vet 1 ability called Hawker Strafing Run. 50 munitions, can suppress infantry, says it's effective against infantry and light vehicles. So let's see if that is the case. Hopefully it's good enough. It doesn't have a super long cast range. Ooh, new sounds. That pop, 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 pop. I don't know if I've heard that sound before. So it took half health off this. About half health off a Grenadier. And same amount of damage that this lost. So yeah, not a massive amount of damage to vehicles. I guess that's why it says it's more effective against light vehicles. Doesn't seem to have much of like a penetration issue against them. Yeah, half health from 40 health. It's reasonable. So it's got, you know, about 1.5 cooldown. One thing that I did notice about this Hawker Strafing Run is that it pins enemy infantry. So you know what that means. Crushy crush time. Typically, it's actually kind of hard to pin squads with a lot of, you know, suppression or off maps. But this has got to be one of the best ways to pin units now. So pin into crush, look out for that combo. Elsewhere in the battle group, loads of abilities have had their command point cost increase. Starting out with the Rocket Loiter, this has gone up by 1, but that makes sense because you lost 1 from having to unlock here. So this is going to arrive at potentially the exact same timing. But the Incendiary Bombing Run has gone up by 2, this has gone up by 1, and this has gone up by 1. You know, overall this is one of the more powerful battle groups and one of the most popular in team games. So they've kind of like tried to shift the balance of power to some of the lesser used units and nerfing some of the more popular abilities. The Vet 1 ability of the Gurkhas, Ayo Gorkhali, has been changed. I can't remember exactly what it was doing pre-patch, but now it gives them plus 50% speed, minus 40% to accuracy of nearby enemy units. I think previous to this, maybe it gave the Gurkhas a buff as well, but that was removed, and maybe the debuff it gives to enemies was increased, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure. And it is worth mentioning that this ability, they can still fire during that speed buff. So it's not like Rifleman Sprint where it disables your weapons while you're closing the gap. You can still fire during that, which does make it a pretty strong option, specifically for the Thompson submachine gun option. Not as good with the Brens. And in the heavy armor battle group, light vehicle with drone refit has its munitions cost increased by 10. On to Afrika Korps, and there's been a slight change to their ticking structure. Now if you unlock fire support elements in the light support company, it will also unlock support armor elements in the mechanized company, and vice versa. If you unlock this here, it will unlock fire support elements back here. It's a little bit cheaper to do it on this side, 25 fuel versus 40, but you know, this kind of needs to be this cost, otherwise the flak feeling would start to arrive too early. So it's done that, just so units hit the field at the right time. And the developers say they did this to try and increase build diversity, because honestly, since the last round of 8-round nerfs, the mechanized company hasn't been that popular, but a lot of units in this structure have been getting buffed up recently. The 8-round this patch, Marder this patch, Recontractor last patch, Stuka D last patch, and the recovery salvaging last patch. So there's a lot of reasons to go mechanized company again. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the increases in build diversity. Also, I made a mistake in my last video. The cooling cost of the LEIG has gone up by 50. Afrika Korps Panzergrenadiers have got a new Vet 1 ability called Mechanized Advance. It's a passive that gives them a capture rate bonus and accuracy bonus when they are in or on a vehicle. So it works with your tank riding, in the 250, or in the med truck. All of those, if the P-Greens are inside of it, they'll get this bonus. And unlike some other bonuses, like maybe the Italian Combined Arms buff, This doesn't work when the squad's inside the troop transport.
250.
The new Vet 1 of the Panzergrenadiers Mechanized Advance does. But I will say that does kind of maybe cause some awkward situations where you're going to have to be like getting in, getting out if you want to combine it up with this buff. Because it does apply for 15 seconds after you get out. So you can kind of get in, get out, get in, get out. But maybe it'd be nice if this could apply to troops who are just inside transports as well. Now that we have this, but whatever. I do think this, you know, thematically is maybe more fun Vet 1, and you know, sometimes in the late game you go for a call and you have a 250 kicking around. You might just like leave it in your base, hope that it becomes relevant later for towing or something. But now you'll be encouraged to use it with your Panzergrenadiers at all times so you can make use of this Vet 1 buff. But it does make Panzergrenadiers maybe a little bit worse in isolation because, you know, if a rifleman's closing distance on you, you won't be able to like pop that previous ability they used to have on the rifleman and hope that that extra boost of damage it gave you will be enough to win the fight anymore. So it kind of makes Panzergrenadiers a little bit worse in isolation, but that ability was always a little bit awkward to use after, you know, the range bonus that it got from the combined arms buff got removed. The 250 has received an armor buff, gone from 5.5 up to 6.5. No changes to the side or rear. I do think maybe it was a little bit squishy after the small arms getting, you know, extra penetration at close quarters. So, alright. And I did always think that like 6 armor was about the right number for it. So we'll see how it shakes out. So I've got a bit of a test lined up here. Dingo versus 250. The classic matchup. This is a very important matchup. So let's see how it goes. Long range and close quarters.
250 has been destroyed.
Looks like Dingo
We have lost
wins
the transport.
about quarter health at close quarters. Maybe more like a third health close to long range. So it looks like you want to be longer range away with the Dingo if possible. On top of that, the combat half-tracks upgrade in the armory now gives 5 armor on all sides instead of 4. So we pop in that, and now it's got 11.5 armor on the front. At that stage, I'm going to say it is going to beat the Dingo in the head-to-head fight quite comfortably as well. And they've also changed the 250/9. Now that's got 13 armor on the front. So this thing's got beefed up even more, got extra armor this patch as well. So this thing, you know, I've been saying it for a long time. Maybe I have to finally make a guide on my 250/9 strat with armor support and the machine gun buff on it, because I think it's quite potent. Assault Grenadiers have been buffed. Their Assault Disembark ability now gives them 15% less damage received while it is active. And also they mentioned something about how the cooldown resets once you jump in and out. So jump in, jump out, and you can see it's got a new icon as well, I believe, the ability. And remember, you get free grenades while this is active, so it's pretty nice. And you can jump in again, jump out again, resets the cooldown. Doesn't reset the grenade cooldown or anything like that, so you can't like jump in and out and spam grenades, but here's a nice little nudge along. On top of that, smoke grenade is now available at Vet 0 again, so it's pretty big because without this at Vet 0, you know, once the 250 had died, they kind of felt weak without the smoke grenade to be able to do shenanigans, get into close range, nullify machine guns. Yeah, I'm glad to see this back at Vet 0. It was sorely missed. The MG34 has got a new Vet 1 ability called Fire Discipline. It gives it 75% more accuracy, but no suppression while it's active, and it lasts for 30 seconds. On first glance, this doesn't sound that good to me, if I'm honest, because we saw the MG34 got an accuracy buff this patch, right? And what that means is that out to about 20 range with this bonus active, you're going to be above 100% chance to hit against a squad that's, you know, not in cover and doesn't have any received accuracy bonuses or anything modifying it, making it harder to hit. So you're not even going to be feeling like the full effect of how strong it is when the squad is like right on top of the machine gun, which they might be because they're not going to be suppressed anymore, so they can just run at it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes here. First off, we've got a bit of a test. I'm going to activate Fire Discipline on all the machine guns on this side. These ones not. And we'll see how they do against a rifle squad at longest range. Remember, once these squads get pinned for 10 seconds, the received accuracy bonuses they get from being pinned get removed. So let's do a quick time to kill comparison here. So yeah, once these squads are dead, most of these squads are about half health. I mean, they certainly died faster, but I don't know. Like, maybe if this was a straight up toggle, it could be alright, but the fact that you activate it and then you won't be able to suppress for 30 seconds, that could get yourself in some sticky situations. I don't think it's like that strong on first glance. Next test of fire discipline, I'm going to activate it on all these machine guns, turn the fog of war on, then run a rifleman forwards and throw a grenade at them. Kind of see how much damage with normal sight lines the rifleman takes on approach. See how much of a threat it is to the machine gun while it's got this ability active.
MG42! Let it go, Bob! Rifles lose 42! Leave him! Taking losses! Heavy MG team down! Silenced! And about time!
When are you going to get a chance to use that ability? I'm not sure. The 8-Rad has come down in fuel cost by 5. It's also had a penetration buff at near and mid-range. Big penetration buff at near range. So we're going to do a bit of a test here. 8-Rad versus Greyhound on this side. Stuart on the other side. The Greyhound does have the armored skirts, but no health boosts on the 8-Rad. So let's see how they shape up. Okay, so the Stuart still gives it a titanic beatdown, but, you know, if you're lucky, you can get the Greyhound down to about quarter health at point blank in the best case scenario. Oh, I suppose not entirely the best case. This is still on the Greyhound's frontal armor. If you're hitting it on the rear, it's going to be pinning every time if it's point blank on the rear of the Greyhound. The Afrika Korps Marder has got a new Vet1 ability called Travel Speed. When it is out of combat, it gets a 30% speed buff. So that's a pretty big deal. You know, it does have trouble keeping up with other vehicles in the Afrika Korps army, like the 8-Rad. But with this, now as it rotates, you know, in the back lines, out of combat, we'll be able to keep up with things like with the 8-Rad, and they'll make it easier to just keep your army together as Afrika Korps. So I think this is a pretty big deal for the Marder. And remember, these out of combat bonuses kick in after the unit's been out of combat for 10 seconds, if you're unaware. But yeah, it doesn't buff it up during combat, so you probably will still want to get this rapid advance boost if you want the Marder to keep pace with things like the Grant. So we're going to have a bit of a race here. Cross 100 range. Let's see what difference it makes. No acceleration buffs. It seems to have got off to a slightly faster start anyway. Let's see how much of a range advantage it's got as it crosses the finish line. What's that, 10, about 25, 20, 25 range earlier. I mean, I suppose 30% right, you'd expect it to be in that ballpark, but yeah, pretty good. The Walking Stuka got a buff to its AoE damage, so now it's going to be doing more damage throughout the vast majority of its area. So we're going to do a test here. We've got some formations of riflemen at 100 range. Let's see how they go. Looks pretty solid. Now we're going to try the Walking Stuka a little bit further away, closer to its max range, against a 17-pounder that's set up with a CMP med truck right next to it. See how it goes. The CMP does have Vet1, so it gets extra health from that, but no training from the training center to boost up its health either. So let's see how we go. Notice one guy standing way away from the rest of the form here, over here by the way. That didn't look as impressive as against the rifleman blob, I have to admit it. That I've got sight as well, which decreases the scatter. You're going to need more than one walking Stuka if you want to tackle a 17-pounder. Or maybe you don't, because now if you use the high explosive barrage, let's stop, that's cooling down. But the Vet 1 ability, Creeping Barrage, is on a separate cooldown now. So you will essentially be able to fire once and then again, if they don't dodge away at all. So that could be a pretty strong option. So here's the Creeping Barrage. Creeping Barrage just has cooldown increased to compensate for this, and it does of course cost 50 munitions, but yeah, once it's Vet 1, Walking Stu is going to be firing quite a bit more often, kind of similar to the Priest in COH3. The L6/40 in the Italian Infantry battle group has received a load of nerfs this patch. First off, a cost increase by 5 fuel. Flamethrower now costs 10 more munitions to upgrade and takes 10 seconds longer to complete the upgrade, and you can't get these spotting scopes on the Flame unit either. But the spotting scopes, if you do get them on the regular L6, now they're operational all the time. You don't have to be stationary to get the bonus vision, so maybe a little bit of a buff. But yeah, I think at this stage, L6 is basically unplayable in 1s. Maybe could still see some use in 4s, just because the flamethrower unit is so good. It's so fast, so good at wiping units on retreat. In 4s, they can have those really long retreat paths, and maybe, players say they've got like one bazooka unit that's all their anti-tank. That gets forced to retreat, then they're very exposed to this. So could maybe still work a little bit in 4s, but not as well as it used to do, because, say you've chased that squad to the base, you wipe it in the base, now you cannot kill the base headquarters and have the player be unable to build it. They'll be able to repair it back up. So yeah, I think L6 is pretty much dead. Maybe they could still do some occasional cheesing though, wiping on retreat in 4s. In the patch notes, it says that Sound the Alarm now has a reticule indicating the area that it affects. But I think this is kind of misleading, because if we activate it, we can see the circle. The circle indicates the bonus vision zone that it gives, right? But not the bonus. The bonus is anywhere in the sector. So you can see this squad outside of the circle, but in the sector it gets the bonus. But this squad that's inside the circle, outside the sector, doesn't get the bonus. So, don't be fooled by this circle. It's not the circle where the bonus is happening. It's just the circle where it's giving vision. A couple changes in the Battlefield Espionage battle group, starting out with transfer depots. Now they cost 1 command point instead of 2, so a little bit easier to unlock. Looking at the transfer depots themselves, they've changed the values here. I think it used to be 50 munitions for 150 manpower. Now it's 80 munitions for 240. So the same ratio. It's not better value or anything, but a bigger lump of munitions for a bigger lump of manpower, which I think is okay, because one of the things that kind of held back transfer depots is, they have a relatively long cooldown. So it took quite a long time for them to pay themselves back. But now if you've got a big lump of munition spare, and especially because some of these abilities in this battle group are not that good, so you can save munitions quite easily. Now you can convert that to manpower quite rewarding, building the transfer depot. Of course, remember, they do get more resources building on, medium or high points. Get better, returns. You can see this is 80 to 160, whereas this is 80 to 240. So you want to be building it on high resource points, which can be difficult sometimes, because high resource points are usually close to the enemy, so easier to kill. There is a problem here, though. It says 80 munitions to 240 manpower. Clicking the button, I got 200 manpower. What's that about? 40 fuel to 240 manpower. 200 manpower. 80 munitions to 160 manpower. That one actually worked. So yeah, something's going on. I haven't checked the high resource points yet, but yeah, this is not quite correct. Disruption Operation has received a load of buffs this patch. It's come down in munitions cost by 25. The tick rate on the debuff is faster. Used to be once every 1.5 seconds. Now it's once per second. So it's going to start hurting the enemy quicker. And then the maximum debuff has been raised as well from 60% to 80%. So units could be really blind and really inaccurate if they sit in this for a long time. But perhaps the biggest change of all is now you can use it in the fog of war, which that alone might have pushed this into relevancy. So, you know, say you're attacking from over here into the mid-VP, probably expect your enemy to be sitting behind this cover here. Now you can just chuck a disruption operation on them and start your attack. And, you know, the enemy has to dodge out of the area. So you just that alone being able to use this in the fog, I think would have been enough to make this decent play, but it's got all those other changes as well. I think this is actually a kind of a good ability now. And finally, Firestorm. This drops more shells over a wider area, but it costs 15 munitions more. Let's have a look at it. I do think this ability was not very good because it doesn't do that much like impact damage. And the enemy can just kind of run out of it without taking much damage. It's decent for zone denial, but the amount of damage it does is just kind of trash. It's easy to retreat out of. This was the circle, by the way. Might need to rework the reticle for that. But yeah, I think no to Firestorm, yes to Disruption Operation. Now let's have a quick look at some of the more important bug fixes. Starting out here, Brumbeer Shatter Will is no longer disabled when it gets engine damage, so that's a big one. Afrika Korps booby traps should no longer trigger when enemy units that cannot capture run over the top of them, so that's nice. Fixed team weapons not responding to long-range attack orders, that's good. Fix an issue where infantry in camouflage, like snipers, would be revealed when in range of certain objects, such as enemy mines or territory points. This is actually one that I found. It's maybe kind of a funny clip about it on my Twitch when I discovered this. I lost my sniper to a mine. I was like, hold on, why is my sniper getting revealed right now? And then ran into a mine. So I'm glad they've fixed that now. You'll be able to run into a mine and be completely unawares. Fix an issue where a certain combination of interactions around towing could result in an abandoned team weapon becoming untargetable and unclickable. This hadn't happened to me personally, but I had seen a few complaints about it on Reddit. Fix an issue where anti-tank rifles did not benefit from the point-blank mechanic. So say if your anti-tank rifle squad was right next to another squad, but on the other side of heavy cover, it would be missing more often and only be doing half damage. This is a bug that I discovered during my deep dive into handheld anti-tank recently. And on top of that, they used the old height advantage bonus. So, you know, if the squad, the AT rifle squad was on the roof or in the top window of a building, they'd be nullifying cover. If the squad was in heavy cover, they'd be doing full damage, full accuracy. So yeah, now they should have the regular 25% accuracy that everything else has. But they didn't change this for the other handheld anti-tank weapons. Don't think it matters for the bazooka too much because it is complete trash against infantry. But, you know, the Shrek does hit occasionally, so maybe that could also benefit from it. And on top of that, you know, I think that handheld anti-tank weapons do get an accuracy bonus from the elevation bonus, which works against vehicles as well. I'm not 100% on that, but I believe it. So, yeah, now those weapons, the bazooka and the Shrek, only get a 10% accuracy bonus, whereas the AT rifles get 25%, which they don't need because they are 100% chance to hit every vehicle in the game because they have so much accuracy. I didn't mention it too much throughout my videos, but there were quite a lot of new UI icons added in this patch, so that was very nice to see. And finally, down the bottom here, instability resolved an issue where the game would sometimes crash on shutdown. I don't know about you guys, but when I close Company of Heroes, when I don't want to play any more games, usually I just hit Alt F4 because, you know, say if you're in game and you want to exit all the way to Windows, you know, if you're doing it through the menu normally, you have to hit exit to main menu, then you go to main menu, hit exit again. It's just too slow. So I'd always hit Alt F4. But I think maybe after the 1.4 patch, every time I Alt F4 would cause a bug splat. Nothing bad would happen, but yeah, it would be a bug splat and then I'd have to close bug splat as well. And that no longer happens, so I'm very happy about that. I plan to do a separate video covering all the veterancy changes because there were just so many of them, so keep your eyes peeled for that in the coming weeks. And let me know what you think about this patch in the comments below. And of course, don't forget, Tightrope merch makes a great Christmas present for anybody. See you in the next one. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon backers, and if you enjoy my content, I hope you consider coming on board.